Tonight on Mid-American Gardener, are your succulents not looking too great? Maybe it's your cool new pot. Jennifer Fishburn and Jennifer Nelson tackle your garden questions and ID plants that have snuck up in your landscape. And they'll tell you when to divide, dig up, and replant your summer favorites. That and much more coming up next on Mid-American Gardener. Hello and thanks for joining us for another episode of Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and joining me in the studio today are two of our panelists who have brought in some things to discuss with you as well as answer some of your questions. We've got the Jennifers. I don't know how else to refer to you. So if you could introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about where we can find you in the garden. So Jennifer Fishburn, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jennifer Fishburn. I work for the University of Illinois Extension as a horticulture educator over in the Sangamon, Menard, and Logan area, so center of the state, Springfield, Lincoln area. And I can talk about anything, but my favorites are vegetables and herbs.
Perfect. All right. Jennifer?
I'm Jennifer Nelson and a horticulturalist as well. You can find me teaching vegetable gardening at University of Illinois, as well as writing my gardening blog, Grounded and Growing, at groundedandgrowing.com. And you can find me in the garden, indoors and out. I love houseplants and I love general horticulture questions and just talking about any kind of plant in general.
Any kind of plant in general, and fighting for your pears, or
yes,
I'm sorry, your peaches.
Fighting the local wildlife
Yes.
is the current project.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so we've got some show and tell items to get into. So Jennifer, we'll start with you. What do you want to talk about first?
I think we'll talk about this beautiful plant right here. So this is an iris that I just took out of the garden this morning. Dug it up, and the reason I did that is right now is a good time, particularly in central Illinois, if you wanted to divide iris or daylilies and peonies. Now is an okay time to do that. So what I wanted to show here is if you were to dig this up, this actually looked like this before I brought it in. There was this way. So we can see the rhizome there, and what I can tell you is this part is not going to make any more plants. So we're going to get rid of that. And then if we want to divide it, we're going to take these three pieces right here and we'll have 3 new plants. The best way to do this is probably get a nice, sharp, clean, sanitized knife. But if you're like me and you just want to do it a little bit different, you know, with what you have, you're just going to break it off. And this piece right here, you won't use anymore. So you'll actually have 3 new plants here. And you'll just put those in the ground. When you plant those, you want to leave part of this rhizome exposed and just stick the roots in there, and voila, there you go. One method to do this with the leaves is you can leave the leaves as be, but because these are diseased, I'm probably just going to do one of these numbers when I plant it. And there you go. Now I got 3 new iris plants.
Now talk to me a little bit about why the one that broke off will not root. And why
so what we have right here is 3 years of growth. So each year it'll grow new rhizome going away from the old one. So these are old and
gotcha. Okay.
No longer needed. There you go.
No longer needed. Okay. Now will you cut back some of those roots, or will you plant
I'll
all
just
of
plant
that?
it just like this. Just like you see it.
Okay. And then lastly, what's the window here? If we're going to divide, how much
I
time?
would get it done pretty quickly. In the next week or so would be really good. Ideally, probably late August. But iris are tough. Mm-hmm. I had iris in a plastic sack for like 6 months and planted them, and they still grew. So who knows? But iris are pretty tough. Daylilies are pretty tough. So, but if you're in this area, I would say in the next week or so would be good.
Next week or so, okay.
I think you and I end up testing the limits of horticulture on a regular basis.
And will this survive? Let's see.
And I've got more iris, so you know, if they don't make it, it's okay. But no, they'll do fine.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Jen.
Okay, I completely used this show as an excuse to buy a new plant. So
well we know.
I had to
I
buy
wonder if we could put together a clip of every time that you've said that on the show.
Lots of times. So I was actually shopping for something else, but then this plant caught my eye, and it looks really interesting how it's growing on a piece of wood, and it's actually growing into the wood, and it's called shingle vine, Rhaphidophora hei, or I don't know how you say the species name, but it is native to the rainforest in Southeast Asia, and it is actually growing into the wood. So I imagine that where it's from, this is probably a pretty not a plant you wouldn't want this growing on your house, because it's literally got little little rootlets that are attaching itself to the support. And what I was reading about is that it can grow into rock if it's a little bit of a porous surface of rock. So interesting there. Wow. It can get around about 32 feet in the wild, but in the home it's only going to get to be about 5 feet. But even that, I think, would be really cool.
Wow. So folks probably where the plant is native are like,
there's a market for this? Yes, right.
Please
take it all.
Take as much as you like.
One drawback is it is toxic, but it makes an calcium oxalate, which makes a crystal that it gets in like your mouth and irritates it. So it's not going to kill you, but it's going to make you really miserable and have an upset stomach. So pets and kids, keep it away. If you have a cat that likes to nibble on plants, probably put this one up out of reach. But it's related to, it's in the same family as Monstera and the arums. So there you can see some similarities in how it grows. But I love how flat it is.
Really
so you
pretty.
see where the name shingle vine comes from.
And when it attaches to the rock, you said it can...
Like it's growing into
the rock, wow.
Yeah, there was a plant that somebody had been messing with in the store and had pulled it away, and you could see little holes in the wood. I'm like, ooh, this is pretty aggressive plant. Yeah, I wouldn't want to have this on my house.
Yeah, no kidding. But it is gorgeous though. So hopefully keep them. Yeah,
we'll see how well it grows at my house. The more you can give it a humid and bright indirect light, the more quickly it will grow. Otherwise, it's a fairly slow grower if it's kind of average humidity in your house.
Okay, we'll have to keep us posted. Yeah. All right, Jennifer, what do you have now?
Well, so my other show and tell today is I call this blue mist or false spiree. It's also called bluebeard is another name for it. Scientifically, it's Caryopteris. This specific one here only grows to about 2 to 3 feet tall and about the same width. It is zone hardy to zone 5, which is where we're at. But when they say that, it's the root zone hardy. So the plant will die back each year. But it'll come back just as robust and beautiful. What I really like about this one is it is a pollinator attractor. So at this time of year, we're attracting lots of different kinds of bees and some butterflies and wasps to it. It's a fall, late summer, early fall bloomer. So it's blooming at a time when not a lot of other perennials are blooming. So that makes it really good for the pollinators. And you can see the color is quite pretty. And it'll grow in sun to part shade.
Now, do you have this in your landscape? Does this grow wild where you are? Where is this?
I do. So I have it around my deck, which is the front of our house. Absolutely beautiful. And I have very informal landscape around my house. So I have 3 of these and lots of other fun things growing. But no, it is not a cookie cutter landscape in front of my house.
I wouldn't expect that from any of you, honestly. The places that we visited, when we get there, I'm like, you know what, this makes sense. Like your love of signs and like the scientific names, I'm like labeling. I'm like, you know what, that is so Jen. That makes sense. So
our personalities definitely come out.
They do, don't they? They do. They definitely do. Is there any fragrance to these?
So the flowers are not fragrant, but the foliage is. It's actually in the same family as mint, so it doesn't have that mint smell, but it says when you brush against it, has a very fragrant smell.
Gotcha.
So.
Can you use it for garnish or?
No, it's not an edible plant.
Okay, do not eat it. I was just wondering. And then lastly, you may have already said this, but how tall does it get?
It gets about 2 feet. Mine is about 2 feet tall that I have right now, and I've got 3 of them right next to each other, and they're just a buzzing this morning.
Yeah, very pretty. Okay, all right, Jen, you've got another plant that you brought.
I just brought a succulent that I thought was interesting. It's called Gasteria, and from gastro meaning stomach. So the flower is supposed to look like a stomach, but the common name is ox tongue or cow tongue. Some people call it lawyer's tongue because the leaves kind of look like a tongue. This one has some interesting variegation. I've got some that have spots, some that are just kind of solid green. But like any succulent, low water needs thrive on neglect. And this one will form little plantlets at the base that you can just break off as they form, and you can propagate it that way. But I also wanted to show, this was a pot that my daughter had to have, and it doesn't have any, well, this happens a lot, right? This doesn't have any drainage in it. And so common misconception is people are like, oh, I'll just put some gravel for drainage and plant right in it. And that becomes a problem because you can never water quite right. You can have it, it's not draining. It's not that gravel's not preventing the water, and you can say you're going to be careful, but a lot of times you end up overwatering or salts build up because you can never really flush it out. So what I do with stuff like this is just keep it in the pot I bought it in, and I'll stick it in. Now, ideally this should fit a little better, but for what I'm doing right now, it's fine. I may find a better fitting pot and transfer it, but go ahead and use those pots as an outer pot over something that's got holes in the bottom.
I have to agree with Margaret.
It's cute, right?
It's a cute pot.
It's a kitty.
It's a cute pot.
Yeah.
She's got great taste.
She does.
By the way. Okay, we've got some questions to answer from some of our viewers. Let's jump to some of those. Question number 49. This is from Cheryl Willis. She wants to know, could someone please identify this plant for me that was growing under my knockout roses? So you guys have chatted a little bit about this. What do you think is under there?
It's an elm tree.
Yeah, it's definitely an
An elm tree, not a plant.
It's a tree.
Well, it's a plant.
Yeah, well, yes,
A really big one, potentially.
Interesting.
And with the moisture we just had in a lot of locations, right now would be a great time to pluck that out of there.
Okay, any special advice on how to? Because sometimes you think you're just going to go over and yoink, and it's not quite that easy. Or you think you can go cut it, and then the root is still there. So how do you guys dig out these little trees?
Just depends on what it is. I know which ones have the deeper root systems, but a spade works really well if you need to get a little bit deeper. And then I've got some that have really, really deep root system, and we'll wait on those until the fall, till they drop their leaves, and go out and cut them and then stump paint them with some.
I do the same thing with brush killer.
Brush killer.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else to add on that one?
Nope.
So, all right, mystery solved on that one. Let's see. Question 50. This is from Holly. Let's see. Wondering if you can ID this flower. It seems like a gladiola, but the flower stem is so flat. What do you guys think this is?
I was thinking, raised the question of blackberry lily. I think that's a possibility. I'd like to see what it looks like once it flowers, but then you brought up the possibility of it being a gladiola.
Yeah, it could very well be a glad that's just not robust. So that was actually what the viewer had commented, that it could be. And I think she might be right, because if you look at the picture, it's right up against the house where it's going to be dry, so it's not getting ample moisture, which would reduce the size of the flower bulb or the flower that's coming through. So,
and there's some other similar plants next to it that look like they're planted at a very regular interval, so that makes me think somebody planted it at some point on purpose. And it may have overwintered itself being close enough to the house, and it's just kind of struggling.
Yeah. Okay. So low fertility, low moisture can cause that.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Question 48. This is from Rita. She says, I'm trying to identify this weed. I first thought it was a wild geranium before the flower had appeared, but now I'm just curious what this cute flower is. Love the show too. Thanks for flying your garden freak flag. Had to slow down and make sure I enunciated that very well. So what do you guys think these weeds are?
Well, this one, I was like, gosh, I should know this. This looks so familiar. And so just going by some of the familiar parts of it, I was able to find it. It's called hooked crowfoot or hooked buttercup. It's a ranunculus, so in the buttercup genus. It's also called blisterwort. It's ranunculus recurvatus. So I think some of the way some of the petals are curving back. A lot of herbivores avoid this plant because it's got some toxicity, but then I was reading some people have observed like groundhogs just eating the heck out of them, so go figure. But some people have said it's a nice addition to a woodland garden. It does have some virtue to it. If you don't want it, it pulls easily.
Okay, anything to add to that?
Nope.
All right. Let's do an insect ID. This is question 51 from Penny. I found this crawling on my porch. I tried to look it up and got Sycamore tussock moth. I can't figure out if these are good or bad.
So it'll become a moth. It eats sycamore leaves. So if you have a robust sycamore tree, it's probably not going to cause any issues for that particular tree, and just leave it be. But I would, due to the hairs on it, I would not bother it.
Okay.
Yeah, generally those are got some toxic quality to them,
Oh.
or at least irritant.
Irritant to your skin.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Okay. Question 62. This is a little bit longer one. This is from Jen Baker about a little devil tree. We have a little devil that had a little dieback this spring and over the summer, especially during the heat and drought. It's only gotten worse. It looks like it's been, or it has been burned. It looks like it's been burned to a crisp in spite of supplemental watering during the dry season. The stems do not look diseased. Only about a quarter of it looks alive. All surrounding plants are fine. The plant is about 3 years old. What do I do? Save it, dig it up, cut it back? What are your thoughts here on either saving or replacing this tree?
Well, first of all, let's define what it is. Little devil, when I first read it without looking at the pictures, I'm like, what are we talking about here? It's actually a cultivar name for a dying bark. So understanding what the plant is going to be key first. It does grow well in full sun or part shade. It's very tolerant of all kinds of soil conditions, except for probably really wet. This particular cultivar is powdery mildew resistant, and it's hardy to zones 3 through 7. So it is a very nice plant to include in your landscape. My first guess was it looks like a drought or a moisture issue when you have an entire stem like that. Was the first guess, but knowing that it's pretty resistant to tolerant to a lot of different conditions, not so sure, but it still could be. The only thing I could find is it does get fire blight, which this particular photo did not exhibit those types of characteristics. She can just prune out the dead if she knows for sure that it's dead.
Okay.
The stem.
And make sure you're continuing to water it, even before it gets to be an extreme drought condition, but just make sure you're on top of that to get it established.
Now, this late in the season, can you still play catch up with watering a tree like this? And if so, what do you do? Is this every day going out and watering? How do you sort of get this tree back on track? What would you do?
Like if we're not getting any rain, like try to get about a half an inch to an inch on it a week, going into when the ground freezes.
In one watering, preferably, not little light watering. So it could, even though sometimes folks say that they're watering something, not knowing their watering practices, it could be helping and it might not be helping. So
it might only be watering the top inch.
Yeah. And you said half
to an inch.
Half to an inch. Okay. So a good water.
Like putting a hose on it and just as a trickle and leaving it for
really
a while.
letting it get.
And what we need to be most concerned about at this time of year is going to be broadleaf and evergreens. If you are in a dry situation or going through a drought type situation, to make sure those stay watered well up until the ground freezes.
All right. Cabbage question. This is from Rachel. What do you recommend to stop cabbage from being eaten that isn't too unhealthy for the plant or for me to eat?
Go for it.
Okay. BT, Bacillus thuringiens, is the go-to that we recommend for most brassicaceae. Just make sure the one you purchase is labeled for cabbage, and use it as it says to use it on the label.
You could also do a row cover if you wanted to just not apply anything at all, and you can just buy that. It's a real thin spun fabric, and you would usually put some sort of support and kind of lay it over, and so it physically prevents those butterflies from laying the eggs that turn into the larvae that eat all your cabbage.
Now, what exactly is eating the cabbage?
It'd be a type of cabbage worm.
Cabbage looper.
Yeah, cabbage looper.
I
And
gotcha.
you do want to make sure you get that row cover on, though, before you see the insects, because otherwise you'll trap them in there.
Trap them in,
So
with food.
Yes,
They're very
with
happy.
Okay, all right. Ash tree trouble. This is from Patty Jordan. 2 of our 3 ash trees are scheduled to be taken down. Are there any recommended special disposal steps to avoid borer infestation in other ash trees? So first, if you could just give a little history for those who may not know why these ash trees are having to be taken down, and then we'll get into the actual question. So either one of you.
I'll say emerald ash borer has been an invasive species that came in through the Great Lakes on shipping crates and has spread to most every state at this point. I remember when the first ones were found in Illinois and everyone was sounding the alarm, but it's pretty well established now.
Yeah, it is established in Illinois to the point that several years ago they eliminated the quarantine for Illinois as far as moving it out of your area. So now there still is a federal quarantine, which is all the states or counties that have known emerald ash borer. That's still a quarantine, but I would just recommend personally just not moving it long distances. So don't move it out of state. Be courteous. There's still, and that should be this case for any type of firewood. People shouldn't be moving that long distances because you never know what could be harboring in there. But as far as a state quarantine, that doesn't exist, and it's now been found in all but 12 states. There's at least one county in all but 12 states. So unfortunate, but
yep, here we are. Let's see, Marge and Richard want to know if there's any way that you can save your begonia tubers and then use them next spring. Is that a thing?
It's possible, and you would have to start cutting back on the watering and such at this point and try to encourage dormancy. Some people will pick the flowers off at this point to try to encourage it to slow down, and then you would dig the tubers out and allow them to dry down and store them. What I was reading was like cooler than your basement, so 40 to 50 degrees. Some people store them in the fridge.
I was just going to ask if you would put them in the refrigerator then.
And usually you put something around them to keep them a little bit moist. You don't want them to totally dry out.
While we're talking about that, did you have anything you wanted to
I was
add
going
on
to say,
that?
we're assuming that's tuberous begonias that he's talking about. If they have bedding begonias or angel wing begonias, those are not treated the same. Those are overwintered indoors in a bright light situation. So
like
you need to know, you need to know what kind of a begonia you actually have.
Know which ones you've got. Okay.
To overwinter that.
I was going to ask, when do you dig up cannas and things like that you're going to take in for the winter? Do you wait until that first frost, or?
That's what I do.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. Don't wait too long after that, because if it
just
stays cold, you're in trouble.
I was just going to ask.
But you get that first frost that kind of turns everything above ground black, then get in there and trim that off and dig them up. And you want them to dry off some. I don't wash them or anything like that. I just knock the dirt off, and I store them in a Rubbermaid tote in our crawl space.
Okay.
And we drilled some holes in it to allow some air, or leave the lid kind of cracked.
Gotcha. Okay. We've got a couple minutes left, about 2 or 3 minutes left. We could do another question, but I wanted to chat a little bit about what's going on in your yards and what you're seeing at home. We'll skip me because, weeds. Weeds in my vegetable garden. Flowers, banner year, but vegetables did not go well for me. So how are things going for you?
Well, I think I shared last time that we had all of our Asian pears eaten by the deer. My husband commented, like, when did you pick those? I'm like, I didn't.
I thought you did.
I thought you did. So my sister recommended something called a blink camera. It's a security camera that I guess it's marketed to use indoors, but we're going to aim it out the window and see if we can get some record of what's actually frequenting our yard. But yeah, I'm really frustrated with wildlife right now.
Same. The deer have broken branches on the apple tree to get to them. So I mean, they're doing a lot right now.
Right.
What about you? What's going on at your place?
So Aaron can bring over his cameras because he has quite the assortment of cameras that he could help you spy.
Send them over. Send them over
for wildlife surveillance.
Like this is no joke. This is war now.
You waited all summer for that.
Right.
So what did I do yesterday? Pull weeds. What am I doing this evening? Pulling weeds, because the soil is really nice and moist and the weeds are coming out great, and I just let a few spots kind of get a little bit too far gone.
We had some like that. I had used lopping shears to cut them down.
Yeah. And then it'll be followed by a good layer of mulch to hopefully be there next spring. Yes. So And then I'm enjoying my my late summer pollinators right now. It's really a lot of fun to walk out the door in the morning with my blue mist and my blue salvia and just hear the little humming that's going on.
So much activity. The sunflowers are really busy too. I've got a few pots by the door, and you can hear the buzz, buzz, buzz every day when you come outside.
I've got a lot of goldfinches and other birds going after mine. I haven't seen the squirrel. We have a squirrel that actually hangs from the big heads. I've got some video of that. It's quite, we call him Jumpy.
Nice.
And yeah, it's quite entertaining.
Very nice. As the summer comes to a close, I don't know about you guys, but I always get a little bit sad.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's kind of a bummer.
Well, it means fresh produce is, you know, diminishing and
and there's nothing like that. All right. Oh, go ahead.
I say, but you can up your squash game. Like, we're going to have all the squash coming into market.
That's true. That's true. All right. One more question. Boar in the Rudbeckia. This is from Kathy. The common stalk borer killed all of my black-eyed Susans. Will it also kill my Russian sage plants? 1 minute.
The information I found says it affects a wide variety of plants. The main thing for control is to make sure that any of your weeds, plant debris is removed in the fall. That's where the eggs will overwinter. So get rid of all that stuff and hope better luck next year.
Cross your fingers for next year. Okay. All right, ladies. Well, that is the show. Thank you guys so much for coming in and sharing your time and talent. And thank you so much for watching. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and we will see you next time. Good night.